In 1982, the world changed. A single song, a single video, transformed not just music, but the way we saw spectacle, art, and perfection. Thriller wasn't just a record, it was an event, a phenomenon, a revolution on vinyl. But behind the sequined gloves, the moonwalk, the fangs and fog, there was something no one knew, something small, a tiny flaw, buried deep within the layers of sound, the rhythm, the visuals. And yet, Michael Jackson refused to fix it. You might be thinking, Michael Jackson? Refused to correct a mistake? The man who obsessed over every note, every movement, every second of every take? The same man who would replay a track for hours, demanding absolute perfection, tirelessly chasing a vision only he could see? Yes, the same man. And it's a story few have dared to tell. What was the mistake? Some say it was inaudible to the human ear, a tiny slip in the rhythm track. Others whisper about a lyrical misstep so subtle that millions of fans never noticed. A flaw that should have been corrected, an imperfection in the king of pop's masterpiece. And yet it remained. Why? Why would a perfectionist leave something unfinished in a song destined to become the most iconic in history? Inside the studio, whispers circulated. Engineers exchanged glances. Producers debated quietly in corners. Some tried to convince him, reasoning that the song and the legacy demanded perfection. But he waved them off, almost as if daring them to challenge him. And so the error stayed, hidden in plain sight, immortalized alongside the dance moves, the screams, and the cinematic horror story that made the world gasp. There's a lesson in every imperfection, but this one carried weight beyond a simple mistake. It became a secret, a mystery that would puzzle fans, music historians, and even those closest to Michael Jackson. Some would later claim that it wasn't a mistake at all, but a deliberate choice, a tiny rebellion, a whisper of humanity in the midst of an immortal myth. Tonight, we unravel that story. We peel back the layers of studio magic, obsession, and defiance. We step behind the curtain, where perfection collided with imperfection, and a king made a decision that would challenge the very notion of artistry. But here's the question that lingers, like a shadow over the moonlit dance floor of history. If the world never noticed, if the song conquered charts, awards, and hearts worldwide, why does this tiny flaw matter? And why, despite countless pleas, did Michael Jackson refuse to correct it? By the end of this journey, you'll see Thriller not just as a cultural phenomenon, but as a study in obsession, imperfection, and genius. A reminder that even legends are human. And sometimes, it's the flaws that define the legend. To understand why the flaw existed, we must first understand the man. Michael Joseph Jackson, known to the world as the King of Pop, was the embodiment of relentless perfection. He didn't just make music, he sculpted it. Each note, each breath, each subtle inflection was deliberate. A minor detail could ruin an entire day in the studio. One misplaced beat, and he would replay the section again and again, tirelessly, sometimes for hours, until it felt right. Yet this obsession had boundaries. While he demanded perfection, Michael also possessed a vision. He knew exactly what Thriller should feel like. He saw the story of the undead in his mind's eye, the shadows, the strobe-lit horror, the spine-tingling crescendos. To him, music wasn't just a song. It was a living narrative. Each vocal inflection, each bass line, was a heartbeat of that story. The world never saw what went on behind the walls of Westlake Recording Studios. They didn't witness the tension, the impatience, the endless retakes. They didn't hear the whispers of frustration from engineers, the polite nudges from producers suggesting, maybe we should fix that, only to be met with a polite but firm dismissal. For Michael, the process wasn't about convenience. It was about integrity. And yet somewhere in that controlled chaos, a mistake slipped through. It wasn't glaring. It wasn't a misplaced chord or a botched vocal. It was something subtle. A tiny misalignment. A note slightly off the intended rhythm, a breath that didn't quite land. Something only a trained ear or the artist himself would notice. And for a man who demanded total control over every sound, leaving that flaw untouched was astonishing. Why didn't he fix it? That's where the story takes an unexpected turn. Michael Jackson wasn't a man who simply overlooked errors. His studio was his kingdom, and he ruled it with precision. To allow imperfection to intentionally leave a misstep in a song went against everything he was known for. And yet he did. Perhaps it was defiance, a subtle act of control in a world that wanted to control him. Or perhaps it was something more profound, a recognition that imperfection, like shadows in a horror scene, could make the whole more compelling. Studio insiders remember those days vividly. They describe a man tense but focused, almost mystical in his dedication, hovering over the soundboard, listening intently, making micro-adjustments. And then at one point, the flaw surfaced. He noticed. Everyone noticed. And instead of correcting it, he made a decision that would baffle and intrigue those around him for decades. By the end of this section, we're left with a paradox. The king of pop, the architect of perfection, deliberately left a mistake in a song that would define a generation. And the question looms, why? What was he protecting, or what statement was he making that no one could yet understand? The error itself is almost invisible. To most, it is imperceptible. Listen to Thriller hundreds of times, and you'll never consciously recognize it. But in the studios where it was recorded, it was as clear as the echo of footsteps in a dark corridor. Some say it was a vocal slip, a tiny hesitation, a breath that comes slightly early or late. Others insist it was a production quirk, a misaligned instrument in the layering of synths and percussion. Whatever it was subtle enough to escape detection by the millions who would later buy the record, watch the video, and idolize the work. Yet to Michael Jackson, it was glaring. Engineers whispered about it in corridors, each trying to rationalize its presence. "It's barely noticeable," they said. "No one will ever hear it." And they were right. Few did. But MJ's obsession was not about what others would notice. It was about what he could hear, what he could feel. Every beat, every harmony mattered to him. The flaw was a ghost in his own music, haunting him with every playback. The decision to leave it unfixed became a silent rebellion. Perhaps it was a statement, a reminder that even in perfection, there exists humanity. Maybe he wanted the world to see that even legends, icons, and gods of music are not immune to mistakes. Or maybe, more intriguingly, he simply wanted to assert control over the narrative. He would not be dictated to. He would not be told that a song must be flawless to be immortal. As the days passed, those in the studio grew uneasy. They tried subtle suggestions, careful nudges, technical solutions. Michael listened, smiled politely, and moved on. He chose to leave the song as it was, complete with its tiny imperfection. It was a moment of quiet defiance, almost imperceptible, yet monumental in its implication. Fans would never notice. Critics would never question it. The song would still soar to the top of charts, the video would still make history, and the world would still worship its perfection. But in that small, hidden misalignment, Michael Jackson had left a piece of himself untouched, secret and unknowable. And so the question remains, a shadow trailing every beat of the song. Was it a mistake, or was it part of a larger plan? Did Michael see something in that imperfection that the rest of us could not? And more importantly, would he ever explain it? Or was it destined to remain one of music history's most tantalizing mysteries? The answer, if it exists, lies deeper in the studio, in the minds of those who were closest to him. And what they reveal next may change everything you thought you knew about the king of pop, perfection, and the secret flaw that refused to be fixed. The story of Thriller's hidden flaw becomes even more fascinating when we step into the studio, where the world never gets to see. Imagine Westlake Recording Studios in 1982, a maze of cables, blinking lights, and heavy soundproof doors. The air is thick with anticipation. Engineers and producers hover over their consoles, headphones pressed tightly against their ears, watching the king of pop perform magic note by note. Every beat is measured, every pause weighed, every vocal nuance scrutinized. Then it happens. A note slightly off, a microsecond too early, a rhythmic hiccup buried under layers of synthesized percussion. Michael Jackson hears it immediately. Those who were there recall the moment in hushed tones, the tension so thick it could be cut with a knife. "He stopped everything," one engineer would later confess. "He just listened. And then he whispered something we couldn't quite catch. That whisper became legendary, though few could interpret it. Some say he said, 'It has to stay.' Others claim it was, "This is part of the story." The ambiguity was deliberate. No one dared press further. Michael had a way of commanding absolute attention without raising his voice, a quiet authority that made the most seasoned studio professionals hesitate. And so the mistake remained, silent yet undeniable. Attempts to correct it were met with gentle but firm resistance. "Maybe we can fix it in the mix," one producer suggested. Michael listened, then shook his head slowly. "No, it's perfect as it is." The word perfect in his lexicon didn't always mean flawless. It meant authentic. It meant true to his vision. And in his mind, the tiny error didn't diminish the song. It enhanced it, adding a layer of depth only he could perceive. What makes this moment extraordinary is not the flaw itself. It is the confession it forced from those around him. Engineers later admitted that the experience challenged their understanding of artistry. "I thought I knew perfection," one said. "Then I realized perfection isn't about removing every flaw. Sometimes it's about embracing them." The irony is stark. The man who demanded perfection in every note taught the lesson that imperfection could be sacred. Yet, despite these confessions, the mystery lingered. No public explanation was offered. Fans marveled at the seamless production, unaware of the imperfection hiding in plain sight. The confession, after all, was not shared with the world. It existed only in whispers, in private memories, in the minds of a handful of insiders who knew they had witnessed something extraordinary and almost incomprehensible. And it raises the question, if perfection can coexist with error, and genius can embrace humanity, what does that say about the way we idolize legends? Are we chasing flawless icons, or are we searching for the moments that reveal their humanity? Michael Jackson didn't just record a song, he recorded a lesson, and it was hidden in the flaw. But as the studio confession fades, another layer emerges, one even more intriguing. How did the world respond, or fail to respond, when faced with a flaw they could not hear? That leads us to the next chapter. A chapter where fans, critics, and historians are blind to a secret that would shape the very perception of a masterpiece. To the world, Thriller was flawless. Charts soared. Awards piled up. The music video became a cultural touchstone, redefining what it meant to combine music, storytelling, and spectacle. And yet the secret flaw persisted, unnoticed by fans, critics, and even most industry professionals. How could something so subtle be invisible to millions? The answer lies in perception. Fans don't listen with the microscopic precision of a studio engineer. They hear the emotion, the story, the rhythm. The music moves them, inspires them, and they feel it deeply. But the tiny hiccup, the imperfection Michael refused to correct, slips past entirely. And perhaps that's exactly what he intended. Critics, meanwhile, were busy deconstructing the song in other ways, praising choreography, vocal range, cinematic innovation. No one examined the micro-level structure of the sound mix. To them, Thriller was untouchable, a perfect marriage of innovation and mass appeal. Any flaw, even if present, would have been invisible amidst the overwhelming spectacle. And so the blind spot persisted, creating an ironic tension between perception and reality. Fans celebrated perfection they could feel but not hear. Critics praised craftsmanship they could observe but not dissect fully. And Michael Jackson alone knew the truth. The song was not flawless in a conventional sense. It was alive, imperfect, human. Music historians later dissected the track, searching for anomalies in the production, in the arrangement, in the vocals. Some claimed to hear something unusual, a note slightly off, a rhythm slightly staggered. Others dismissed these observations, attributing them to tape anomalies or the quirks of analog recording. But the debate only fueled the legend. Michael had created an imperfection that was almost invisible, yet capable of sparking endless speculation decades later. And what of the fans? The blind spot was, in a way, a gift. It allowed them to experience the mythic perfection of Thriller, unaware of the deliberate imperfection that gave it depth. Every scream, every step, every bass line hit with the intensity of legend. But underneath, a quiet rebellion whispered, "Art is not about flawless execution. It's about emotion, risk, and the courage to leave the unseen truth untouched." The unanswered question lingers like a shadow over the moonwalk. Why did Michael choose to let the flaw persist? Was it stubbornness, genius, a secret message only he could understand? Insiders can only speculate, and that speculation drives the fascination, the mythology, the eternal debate. As fans continue to celebrate what they cannot perceive, the story deepens. The secret flaw becomes a lens through which we see Michael Jackson not just as a performer, but as a visionary willing to challenge the world's obsession with perfection. And just when we think we might have understood it, another layer of mystery emerges, one that will reveal the psychological depth behind his refusal to fix what most would see as a simple mistake. The shadow of imperfection stretches further than the studio. Beyond the charts, beyond the applause. It touches the heart of artistry itself, and it forces us to ask, what if the flaw was the point all along? To understand why Michael Jackson refused to fix the flaw in Thriller, we must look deeper, beyond the studio, beyond the chart-topping success, beyond the applause. We must look into the mind of a man who carried the weight of perfection on his shoulders, yet somehow allowed imperfection to breathe in his work. Michael Jackson's psychology was complex, layered with contradictions. On one hand, he demanded the impossible: flawless vocal runs, perfect choreography, a music video that resembled a cinematic masterpiece. On the other, he was deeply human, sensitive, introspective, and profoundly aware of the fragility of life and art. The tiny flaw in Thriller was not an oversight. It was a deliberate choice rooted in his understanding of balance, control, and the imperfection inherent in all human creation. Some insiders suggest it was a test of loyalty, of attention to detail, of understanding the unspoken language of his vision. By leaving the flaw, Michael was asking those around him to look deeper, to question not just the song, but themselves. Could they recognize genius in imperfection? Could they embrace a human mistake as part of a larger truth? Others argue it was a protective measure. In a world obsessed with image, with flawless icons, Michael may have wanted to leave a trace of humanity in the myth, a reminder that even legends are not immune to error. To him, the tiny flaw may have been a signature, a subtle mark that said, "This is me." Imperfect, relentless, alive. But perhaps the most intriguing theory is more psychological. Michael was deeply superstitious, obsessed with numerology, symbolism, and hidden meaning. Could the flaw have been a deliberate signal? A secret embedded in the track that only he fully understood? A message for future generations, or perhaps a personal talisman against the relentless scrutiny of fame? What makes this refusal so compelling is the paradox it creates. The world perceives Thriller as flawless. Critics praise its genius. Fans revere its perfection. Yet in reality, perfection itself is a construct, an illusion Michael knew how to manipulate. By refusing to correct the mistake, he controlled the narrative, forcing the world to confront the idea that what we perceive as perfect may conceal unseen truths. And so the mystery deepens. What was Michael protecting? Was it the integrity of the song, the secrecy of a personal ritual, or a deeper philosophical statement? No one outside his inner circle knows for sure. But the refusal itself became a defining moment. A quiet, almost imperceptible act that spoke volumes about who Michael Jackson was and what he believed art could be. As we leave this section, one question hangs in the air. If genius can embrace imperfection, and if refusal can be a statement, what else lies hidden behind the meticulously constructed world of Michael Jackson? What secrets remain and who will uncover them? The studio was a kingdom. Westlake Recording Studios, a cathedral of music and innovation, held the keys to Thriller's creation, and for a brief period, the secrets that would baffle even the most dedicated fans. Behind closed doors, Michael Jackson ruled with precision, intuition, and a quiet authority that few could challenge. But it wasn't just the equipment, the soundboards, or the blinking lights that made the space legendary. It was the drama, the tension, the human stakes that unfolded there daily. Insiders describe a scene almost cinematic in intensity. Engineers adjusting levels, producers debating minute details, backup vocalists watching with cautious respect. Every decision mattered, every nuance could alter the final product. And then, inevitably, the flaw appeared. a whisper of error, a ghost note haunting the masterpiece. What followed was a series of delicate confrontations, each tinged with awe and fear. Michael didn't raise his voice. He didn't lash out. He simply listened, a frown barely visible, his eyes locked on the speakers as if reading the hidden language of sound. Then a pause, a silence so heavy that it pressed against the walls, so palpable it made everyone hold their breath. Finally he spoke, not to issue commands, but to declare intent. "It stays," he said. The room held its collective shock. Some tried to reason, carefully suggesting adjustments that would render the error inaudible. But Michael resolute refused. Every argument dissolved against his quiet authority. And yet there was no anger, no ego, only the unshakable certainty that the song's truth was more important than its flawlessness. Behind closed doors, these moments created a new kind of tension, a psychological drama unfolding in silence. Engineers debated among themselves. Was this genius or stubbornness? Was this intentional artistry or the idiosyncrasy of a man obsessed with control? Each answer was speculative, each theory as fragile as the error itself. One producer later confessed that he was both terrified and inspired. He wasn't just making a song, he said. He was creating a world. And in that world, he decided what was sacred and what could remain untamed. In leaving the flaw untouched, Michael Jackson was not merely tolerating imperfection, he was elevating it, transforming it into a component of his narrative, a quiet rebellion against conventional expectations of art. The story extends beyond the studio. Choreographers, dancers, and collaborators were often caught in this silent tension, navigating the line between guidance and defiance. Every rehearsal, every playback was a negotiation, a dance of respect, fear, and admiration. Behind closed doors, Michael was more than a performer. He was a visionary, a taskmaster, a philosopher of sound and movement. And in that space, even a tiny mistake became a lesson, a puzzle, and a testament to the complexity of genius. Yet the world outside remained oblivious. Fans cheered, critics analyzed, and the media glorified what they perceived as perfection. Meanwhile, the secret flaw persisted, a hidden narrative embedded within the track. And the drama behind the scenes continued, invisible to the public but profoundly influential to those who witnessed it firsthand. As we close this chapter, the tension escalates. The quiet refusal, the studio confessions, the psychological depth, all converge to paint a portrait of a man whose genius was inseparable from his contradictions. And just when we think we've glimpsed the full picture, the story teases another layer, one that explores the ripple effects of this imperfection, the subtle consequences that may have changed how the world experienced Thriller. The question now becomes unavoidable. Can a single hidden mistake redefine a legend? And what does that reveal about the cost of perfection, the power of defiance, and the enigmatic mind of Michael Jackson? The hidden flaw in Thriller did more than irritate engineers or provoke whispered debates in studios. It rippled far beyond Westlake Recording Studios, subtly shaping the way the world experienced the song, even if no one realized it at the time. Music, after all, is as much about feeling as it is about precision. And this tiny imperfection, buried under layers of production, became an unintentional emotional catalyst. Listeners might not hear it consciously, but the subconscious reacts differently to unpredictability. A misaligned note, a breath slightly off, or a rhythm imperfection can evoke tension, anticipation, or unease, feelings that amplify the cinematic horror of Thriller. In other words, the flaw may have heightened the very emotional impact that Michael Jackson sought to create. What seemed like a minor error to the casual observer could actually enhance the song's legendary suspense. Producers and collaborators have long debated this theory. Some argue that the flaw humanized an otherwise mechanical perfection, subtly connecting the audience to the music on an instinctual level. Others suggest that it gave the song its uncanny vitality, the slight irregularity that makes listeners lean in, feel a shiver, or pause subconsciously. Michael, always the orchestrator of emotion, may have understood this instinctively, allowing imperfection to serve a higher purpose. The ripple effect wasn't limited to audio. Consider the Thriller music video itself. Choreography, pacing, editing, everything was synchronized to precision, yet the small sonic imperfection subtly aligned with visual tension. The human brain is extraordinarily sensitive to dissonance, and even minor anomalies can elevate engagement. Without knowing why, audiences might have felt the tension, the eeriness, the uncanny thrill, without ever pinpointing the source. Yet there's more to the story. The flaw influenced the mythology of Michael Jackson himself. Fans obsessed over every detail, dissecting his performances, videos, and lyrics. Musicologists scrutinized the composition. And in every analysis, the hidden imperfection became a silent ghost, feeding speculation, creating mystery, and reinforcing the perception of Thriller as a near-mystical masterpiece. In other words, the mistake, invisible to most, amplified the legend. The ripple effect even extended to Michael's collaborators. Engineers and producers who initially feared embarrassment instead gained insight into artistry that transcends flawless execution. They learned that genius is not about perfection alone. It is about vision, intuition, and daring to leave a signature that challenges convention. In a sense, the flaw became a secret lesson, a hidden thread connecting Michael's collaborators to the truth behind the myth. And so, the imperfection that some feared would tarnish the song instead reinforced its legacy. But it also created a question impossible to ignore. If a single, almost imperceptible flaw can influence emotion, perception, and mythology, what else in art and life is shaped by imperfection? What truths remain hidden behind what we perceive as perfect? The ripple continues, and with it, the mystery deepens. Even decades later, listeners sense something profound in the track. A tension, a heartbeat, a shadow, and they have no idea why. And that shadow leads directly to the next chapter, where legend and reality collide in ways that challenge everything fans thought they knew about Michael Jackson. By now, the contrast is clear. Michael Jackson, the mythic perfectionist, deliberately left a flaw in the most iconic song of all time. Legend and reality, once inseparable, now exist in tension. To the public, Thriller is flawless, immortal, untouchable. But behind the myth, the truth is more complicated, more human, more fascinating, and far more revealing about the king of pop himself. Legends are often constructed from perception, not reality. The world sees the sequined glove, the moonwalk, the flawless choreography. But reality is messy, nuanced, and imperfect. Michael Jackson understood this. He knew that if the world only ever saw perfection, it would never truly understand the person behind the persona. The small flaw in Thriller became a bridge between the myth and the man, a subtle acknowledgement that even icons are human. Critics have wrestled with this duality. Some dismiss the flaw as inconsequential, a minor technical slip in a sea of genius. Others elevate it as evidence of Michael's genius, the deliberate act of leaving imperfection to enhance emotional impact and narrative depth. Both perspectives reveal a deeper truth. The boundary between legend and reality is porous, and Michael navigated it masterfully. Fans, meanwhile, continue to worship Thriller as a perfect artifact. Few realize that the imperfection, invisible to most, is part of what makes the song resonate decades later. It's a paradox. The mistake amplifies the legend, even as it undermines the illusion of flawless perfection. Michael's refusal to correct it transforms the flaw into a symbol, a reminder that genius and humanity coexist, often in tension, sometimes in quiet rebellion. Music historians have long speculated about Michael's motivations. Some suggest psychological factors, obsession with control, superstition, or hidden symbolism. Others point to artistic philosophy, imperfection as authenticity, flaw as narrative device. Yet no single theory fully captures the complexity of his decision. That ambiguity is precisely what makes the story so compelling. The refusal itself becomes a statement, a riddle, a secret woven into the music, and there is an emotional resonance here that transcends technicalities. The flaw is not merely sonic. It is a reflection of the man. Michael Jackson's life was defined by contradictions, vulnerability and bravado, innocence and obsession, humanity and legend. By leaving a mistake in Thriller, he acknowledged these contradictions in the purest way possible, through art. This realization reframes everything we think we know about the King of Pop. The song, the video, the performances, all of it remains iconic, transcendent, and beloved. Yet beneath the surface, hidden from the world, lies a quiet truth. Perfection is not always the goal. Sometimes, leaving space for imperfection creates a legacy that is not only timeless, but profoundly human. The tension between legend and reality, between perfection and flaw, continues to fascinate fans and scholars alike. The hidden error in Thriller is more than a curiosity. It is a lens through which we understand the genius of Michael Jackson, his courage, and his uncompromising vision. And as the story unfolds further, it leads inexorably to the climax, where the full meaning of this imperfection and Michael's refusal to fix it will finally be revealed. The question that lingers is inescapable. If a hidden flaw can define a masterpiece, and a refusal can reveal a man, what other secrets lie beneath the surface of the icons we worship? And what will we discover when we finally confront the truth? Everything comes to a head when we confront the full weight of Michael Jackson's decision, the flaw that defined a masterpiece, and the refusal that defied convention. After decades of speculation, rumors, and studio confessions, the reality is astonishing. Michael Jackson left the tiny imperfection in Thriller intentionally. It was neither accident nor oversight. It was an artistic choice, deliberate, audacious, and profoundly human. The revelation shocks even those who idolized him. To the world, Thriller was flawless, a perfect marriage of rhythm, vocals, and visual storytelling. But to those who were present, who heard every subtle nuance, the truth was more nuanced, more daring, and far more revealing about the man behind the myth. The flaw, invisible to millions of listeners, was Michael's way of asserting control over his own narrative. It was a reminder that perfection is a construct, and artistry is measured not just by precision, but by emotional truth. Insiders describe the moment he revealed, or at least implied, the reasoning behind his choice. "He told us," one producer said, "that some things are meant to stay. They carry their own life. They speak in ways perfection never could." That small, cryptic declaration encapsulates the essence of Michael Jackson's genius. By refusing to correct what seemed minor, he elevated it into something monumental, a philosophical statement embedded in a pop song. The implications are staggering. Imagine a song that reaches billions of listeners, becomes the benchmark for visual and musical storytelling, yet contains a secret layer known only to the creator. The tiny flaw is no longer a mistake. It is a hidden heartbeat, a silent testament to human complexity. Michael Jackson used it as a conduit, a way to communicate that genius is not about flawless execution, but about intention, emotion, and authenticity. And then there is the psychological depth. Michael was more than a perfectionist. He was a philosopher of sound and emotion. He understood that leaving a flaw exposed creates tension, invites curiosity, and challenges perception. Listeners subconsciously respond to subtle imperfection, feeling the vulnerability, the humanity, and the tension. By leaving the flaw, Michael Jackson transformed Thriller into a living, breathing piece of art, an imperfect masterpiece that continues to captivate decades later. The revelation forces a profound reconsideration of how we define artistic perfection. Is perfection simply technical accuracy? Or is it the courage to embrace imperfection when it enhances the story? Michael Jackson answered this question without saying a word, embedding it in a song that millions will never forget, yet will never fully understand. As we confront this truth, we realize that the flaw, the refusal, and the secret insight into his mind converge into a single, astonishing statement. Art is not flawless, it is fearless. It is human. And sometimes it is the imperfection that makes a masterpiece immortal. Yet even now, the question remains, if perfection can be redefined by imperfection, what else in music, art, or life is hiding beneath the surface, waiting to reveal its secret meaning? In the quiet aftermath of revelation, the story of Thriller's hidden flaw settles into a larger truth. Imperfection can be power. Michael Jackson, the man who seemed untouchable, untarnished and perfect, showed us that flaws are not weaknesses. They are opportunities for depth, resonance, and humanity. The tiny imperfection, invisible to the masses, becomes symbolic. It reminds us that art is not merely about precision, accolades, or technical mastery. Art is about emotion. Art is about connection. And sometimes art is about daring to leave the imperceptible uncorrected, trusting that its presence will echo in ways no one else can anticipate. Fans continue to celebrate Thriller as a flawless phenomenon. Yet what they are drawn to is something deeper than perfection: the subtle tension, the unspoken heartbeat, the imperfection that makes it feel alive. Michael Jackson's refusal to correct the flaw did not diminish the song's impact. It enhanced it. The legend was strengthened not by polish, but by authenticity. Critics and music historians now see it differently. The tiny misstep is no longer an error to be lamented. It is a signature, a deliberate brushstroke in a masterpiece. The flaw teaches a timeless lesson. The pursuit of perfection should never overshadow the pursuit of truth. Michael Jackson's genius lay not only in his technical skill, but in his ability to see the value of imperfection and to wield it as a narrative device, as a philosophical statement, and as a deeply human expression. Consider the broader implications. In a world obsessed with flawless images, perfect performances, and curated identities, Michael Jackson's decision resonates profoundly. He challenges us to embrace imperfection, to acknowledge vulnerability, and to recognize that the unseen, the subtle, the imperfect, often holds the most enduring power, even beyond music. The lesson transcends art. In life, as in Thriller, imperfection is inevitable. But rather than concealing it, we can embrace it, allowing it to shape our experiences, our creations, and our connections. Michael Jackson's small, hidden flaw becomes a metaphor for humanity itself, beautiful, complex, and alive precisely because it is not flawless. As we close this story, we return to the larger question that has haunted the legend of Thriller. What defines greatness? Is it perfection, or is it the courage to leave something unresolved, imperfect, and profoundly human? Michael Jackson chose the latter, leaving a quiet yet powerful lesson for the world. Imperfection can define a legacy, shape perception, and elevate art beyond the ordinary. The final takeaway is both emotional and cinematic. The next time you listen to Thriller, you may never consciously detect the hidden flaw. You may never hear the notes slightly off, the rhythm slightly staggered. Yet in some inexplicable way, you will feel it. The tension, the heartbeat, the imperfection that makes the song alive, eternal, and unforgettable. Michael Jackson did not simply create a song. He created a lesson in genius, defiance, and humanity. And in that lesson, the smallest imperfection became the most profound truth. That art, like life, is immortal not despite its flaws, but because of them. If you've ever wondered what separates a masterpiece from a legend, the answer is here, hidden in plain sight, quietly waiting for the listener who dares to feel what cannot always be seen.